let me begin by looking at Alamance Burlington School System. Most of you know that on August the 26th of 2024, Alamance Burlington School System adopted the Biden Title IX that impacted the school system and other school systems alike. But let's go ahead. I'll get more into that. I want them to tell the story as it unfolds, and I will sort of add to it as we move along. But now I'm going to take you to I think this is the August of 26, 2024 Alamance Burlington School Board meeting where they're talking about Title IX. And some of the things that you're going to notice is, number one, they don't allow the public to speak before they vote to adopt it. Number two, it seems like from one of the people in the public comments that was speaking said that they did this during a work session. So it seems like there was some sneaky activity taking place within this Alamance Burlington School Board. And then we're going to be looking at what are they going to do now, because don't forget about the most recent executive order reversing the Biden Title IX policies. And then we'll turn our attention to the sales tax initiative. If you live in Alamance County, you're going to want to listen to that. But let's get into the ABSS issue right now. And this, again, as I said, is the August 26th. I believe it's the 2024 meeting. And this is the way it unfolds. I'll explain it to you as we move along. But listen to this.
Members, you've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve as presented?
Motion to approve.
No. Yes, Mr. Bowden.
I would like to.
So they have, I'm going to interrupt right here. They're trying to adopt the agenda, but Ryan Bowden is going to make a suggestion here to try to change this, the steps of allowing people to speak, the public comments. He's wanting to allow the people to speak before I think they go into the closed session or adopt this or whatever they do. And listen, this is unbelievable just how the majority of this board just ignores what he says. Listen to this.
We request that we switch item D and E, just flip-flop those two. Let's have public comments before we hear information from our attorney on item D.
Okay. Is that a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second?
So Ryan is making now he's a former school board member, but he's making, wanting to make an amendment to it so that they hear the people speak before they actually hear the attorney speak, is what he's saying. But you're going to see this board is not having that. They don't care what the public comments are. They've already made up their mind.
Hearing none, the motion fails. I will reintroduce the motion to for the agenda as presented.
Motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Any discussion?
Yes, ma'am. I would just like to say that the reason I requested that was I know we're probably got several speakers on that topic, and it would also give our attorney the opportunity to give some clarification during our public comments, what may come up during the public comments. So I just thought that was best to give our public the opportunity to speak before there was discussion on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carried.
So the motion carried to adopt those minutes and to not allow the public comments to take place before they heard from the attorney. Listen, I look at this board and I see that I voted for some of them, for probably 4 of them, 5 of them. It looks like at one point in time. And now they're saying they don't want to hear about the public comments. They want to hear the attorney first, and then they'll listen to the people later. And Ryan Bowden, I think, did the right thing here, trying to get the people's voice heard. But you heard he was shot down by a vote of 6-1. And, we're going to have to start remembering who these people are on the school board, whether you have kids in ABSS, whether your kids are in private school, charter school, whether they're out of school, whether you don't have any kids. If you're a voter in Alamance County, we're going to start paying attention to who we put on this board, because this is dealing with Title IX. And I'm going to show you just a little bit about that in just a moment. But notice now they are moving on after listening to the attorney speak. And listen, I encourage you to go back and listen to this meeting. I encourage you to listen to it. It's ridiculous. But listen to these comments. Now we're moving to public comments, and I've selected two to speak out against this Title IX initiative of the Biden administration that they're, quote, forcing upon the school systems. Now, listen to what they say, because it's going to be interesting. This board is not acting in a sense of integrity. They're acting or behaving in a sense of something else. And I don't know what it is, because you're going to listen to these two public comments. And I think Corey Shepard makes a good point as to why they should have waited. They didn't have to push this Title IX. Listen to this. We'll hear from Ed Priola, and then we'll hear from Corey Shepard.
Good evening. For years now, this Board of Education has been mired in scandals surrounded by a lack of transparency, conflicts of interest, and financial mismanagement. Last week, you did it again. Last week, you did it again.
And listen to what Ed says that they did. Listen to this.
You took what was supposed to be an official action and conducted it during a work session without public notice, as Dr. Parker mentioned, without public comment, as we know here tonight. We're going through the work session tonight, and without public feedback. Now the horse is out of the barn. Reportedly, you relied on the advice of Attorney Mitchell. Evidently, the attorney failed to provide you with enough information for the level of controversy, so much so that this is being litigated in 26 different states at this very time. The Supreme Court blocked further action on the revisions by this administration. What's at stake is Title IX, which was designed to guarantee students equal educational and athletic opportunity, that is females, to those afforded to male students. Last week, you voted to support a radical revision of Title IX. You elected to endorse a redefinition of, quote, sex discrimination, unquote, to include, among other things, a student's preferred, quote, gender identity, unquote. According to those state lawsuits, that requirement will result in compelled speech. Some of those lawsuits in compelled speech. Teachers and students, teachers will end up losing their job if they misgender a student, according to those definitions. And if you're a student, you can be expelled. Look, government is supposed to be open and transparent. This should have happened this week, not last week. You knew that when you adopted the new policy revisions without notice, without public comment, and without public feedback.
And those are three powerful elements that we're missing here. This is why I say this school board is behaving in a way, it's acting in a way that doesn't want anybody's feedback. They don't want the people to put their input into this issue. And Ed is exactly right. The school board is behaving somewhat in a rogue manner. And, this is why it's so important that we get involved with the school board. We've got to be involved. You can no longer sit on the sideline. You got to get involved. Let's listen as he finishes.
This body, once again, elected to violate the public's trust. That, folks, is unacceptable. You need to do a better job.
Thank you, board members, and Dr. Harrison for your time.
And this is Corey Shepard. I think she ran for ABSS school board in the last election. Ed Priola, of course, is now a city and county commissioner.
Tonight, however, I would have preferred time for public comments before your vote to change Title IX policy. I want you to know that many parents and teachers have told me they didn't feel like they could be here tonight and speak publicly about this because they have concerns and fear retribution from employers about this issue, including ABSS staff. They fear their businesses may be targeted, or they fear that their child may be treated unfairly.
Wow, that is interesting that people would not come to that meeting because they're fearful that they may be targeted by someone in ABSS, the leadership maybe looked over for a position that they rightly deserved and had the merits to show that they deserved it, and yet they would be overlooked or passed over, or worse, as she said, they may be targeted. in another way.
School. I would love to discuss the history of Title IX, the possible lawsuits you may face if you put girls in danger or restrict the constitutional right of free speech, the likely outcomes in courts, and how the Kansas lawsuit, the Grimm case, which I have consulted 3 lawyers and read the opinion of the Attorney General of Virginia that says it was an applied challenge specifically to Grimm, and it's not a blanket prohibition to require segregation. The Chevron deference, and recent Supreme Court decision that will come into play, but I have very limited time. Mr. Mitchell did correct something that was said at the last meeting, that it was said that you need to do this to comply with the ruling of Congress, and your previous policy was actually in line with what was passed by Congress in 1972.
And she makes a very good point there, because they're saying they've got to bring this in line with legislation. No. The policy that was already implemented and in place at ABSS was already following the legislation that was created in 1972 to protect girls' sports and all the things that were entailed in there. So she makes a very good point on that, because they're making it sound like they're doing even protecting it even to a greater degree. And listen, what Joe Biden did is not legislation. I'll point that out in just a minute. That was executive order. Keep listening to Corey.
This policy is a radical interpretation by the Biden administration that redefines the word sex. You can't protect women or men from sex discrimination if you can't define the word sex. I do not come in here to speak at every meeting. In fact, I've only appeared in front of this board once before, and that was about implementing telehealth in school. I asked you then to use more discernment in your decisions. I asked you to consider consequences and repercussions and costs before voting. And here I am again with the same plea regarding the Title IX, except now it may be too late. You implied you had no choice, but that simply isn't true. You always have a choice to do the right thing. The vast majority of NC school districts, despite the August 1st deadline, have decided to choose another option. Out of 115 school districts in this state, to my knowledge, you were the second, only behind Wake County, to implement this policy.
Now that's pretty powerful and pretty telling right there, that out of 115 school systems in North Carolina, Alamance County is the second one to do it behind Wake County. Why were they in such a hurry to try to get this done? Why didn't they wait and let us see how this would play out in the courts? Why wouldn't they let us see how the Supreme Court would rule? There's something more going on here.
Most other districts, including some of the most liberal districts in the state, have decided to wait and see what happens in the courts. Superintendent Maggie Fairman of Asheville City Schools said, "We aren't on any list submitted to the judge at this point." But she said she will delay implementing the new rule until the Kansas court provides more clarity about the reach of the injunction.
And that's the question about ABSS. Why didn't we wait until the courts had ruled? Why were they in such a hurry?
Anna Gillespie from the education law firm Campbell Shatley said her firm's waiting to see what happens with Kansas court decision before providing guidance to the Transylvania County schools.
So there you
years
have
now,
two
This
statements
Board
made
of
by
Education
one
has
by
been marred.
Ed Priola, the other made by Corey Shepard. And notice I'm going to show you, this is from an article of, I think it was August the 29th, 2024. This is the Alamance News. And after they had enacted this new Title IX policy, they asked Sandy Ellington-Graves, who is the school board chairlady. Notice what she says. It says, school board chairwoman Sandy Ellington-Graves told the Alamance News last week that the board had no plans to reconsider or rescind its new Title IX policy after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on August the 16th that multiple injunctions blocking the new regulations could remain in place. So even though the Supreme Court has spoken, even though they said they were going to allow those injunctions to remain in place, Sandy Ellington-Graves stands up and says, well, that's not going to change our mind. We're the ABSS board. We're not going to change our mind. Notice, she says the Supreme Court's decision does not change the fact that the Office of Civil Rights will enforce the new legislation. What new legislation? The president can't write legislation. The legislation is written by the Congress. The legislation is that which is written and passed and then signed into law by the president. His is simply an executive order. The law was the 1972 Title IX that was passed. So they have, according to this, have no desire to change that at this time. Now, this is where it's going to lead me now. This is what she said in 2024. So let me read one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it to another question. Notice here's Fox News, and it's hard to read for you probably, but I think you can read it. But notice it says this: under the Biden administration's 2024 Title IX rule interpretation, the definition of sex was changed to include gender identity as well as sexual orientation. U.S. District Court Judge Terry Daughtry issued a preliminary injunction on June 13th, 2024 to the Biden administration's Title IX rewrite, saying this case demonstrates the abuse of power by executive federal agencies in the rulemaking process. This separation of powers and system of checks and balances exist in this country for a reason. The president cannot write legislation, Miss Ellington-Graves. That's the Congress's job, and they had written that in 1972. On January the 9th, 2025, Chief Judge Danny Reeves of Eastern District Court, Kentucky, struck down the Biden administration's 2024 rewrite, saying when Title IX is viewed in its entirety, it is abundantly clear that discrimination on the basis of sex means discrimination on the basis of being a male or female. As this court and others have explained, expanding the meaning of on the basis of sex to include gender identity turns Title IX on its head. So you have two there stating that the president, what he did is not legal. It's not legal what he did. But this is where I want to ask you now. Now President Donald Trump, 47, has now reversed the Biden Title IX policies. That brings me to this question. Will this ABSS school board adjust this Title IX policy back to what it was? And the reason I say that is because they stand the same chance of losing federal funding if they fail to comply with what the president has said. Now, what will they do? Well, I think that they will. I don't know what they'll do. We'll have to watch them and we'll see what they do. And if they don't do the right thing here, you know, it's interesting. They're not willing to change it back. I'd be interested to hear what Sandy says now. She may still be willing to leave it the way it is. I don't know. She may want to change it. I'm not sure. But if they don't, they're going to be willing. They better be willing to be to lose federal funding. And it's interesting. If you listen to this meeting, this meeting that they were just in 2024, in August of 2024, you'll hear them. They're losing all this federal money. That's what their biggest concern was. Well, now if they don't comply with this new executive order from President Trump, are they going to still take the same stand and potentially lose federal funding? Well, that will remain to be seen. So we'll see how that takes place.